In this lecture, we will discuss the topic job work. What do we mean by job work? As the name suggests, work of a job which is assigned to me. I always give a very simple example of this job work. If I am a manufacturer of jeans and I want buttons to be stitched, but I don't have the expertise or my labor is not expert in stitching the buttons on jeans which I manufacture, but I know that there is this person, a small person, a small laborer who is an expert in stitching the buttons on the jeans. So what I will do, I will send those, for example, I have manufactured 1000 jeans. I will send 1000 jeans at the place where that worker who is an expert in stitching buttons on the jeans is staying. I will send jeans, and it is also possible that I will send buttons also, so that the person can stitch the buttons and send back my jeans and unused buttons. It is a case of job work. So I have not supplied the jeans. I have simply sent the jeans so that some job work is over or a small work of stitching buttons on the jeans is over. Entire stock of jeans I will receive back. It is job work. It is now in my example I am sending jeans as well as buttons, but it is possible that I only send the jeans, but buttons are available with that expert. But still, it will be treated as job work because whatever goods I have sent, that job worker is not authorized to sell it further. That worker has to wait for my instructions. So the worker's job is what? To do the job work, to stitch the buttons. In buttons, it is possible that these are his own buttons or these buttons that worker has in his stock, or I have sent along with the jeans buttons also. This is a case of job work. So today's topic of discussion is job work. So let me share with you section 143 of the CGST Act 2017. Let me share the screen with you. So let me show you the original act. Now in my example, manufacturing jeans is not the job work. Stitching buttons on the jeans, that is the job work, and that worker is job worker. But when I manufacture jeans, it is not a job work. It is a simple manufacturing of any good. Job work is which work? When on the supplied goods, I do something and send back those goods to the same person who has given me those goods. Let me show you section 143 with you. I hope the screen is visible. Now this is section 143, as you can see on the screen. Now heading of section 143 is what? Job work procedure. That in these cases, when someone sends the goods to another person, and when that another person completes his or her work, the goods have to send back by that another person to the original person who has sent the goods. But what the procedure needs to be followed, that is explained in section 143. So we will discuss this section, section 143. The heading of section 143 is job work procedure. So it's not a big section, it's a small section and it's a small topic. Now before this, let me show you the definition of job work. It is written in section 2 of the CGST Act. Section 2, clause 68. Section 2, clause 68 defines job work. And job work means any treatment or process undertaken by a person on goods belonging to another registered person, and the expression job worker shall be construed accordingly. So that means, what is this? Any treatment or process undertaken by a person. In my example, who is this person? The person who is an expert in stitching buttons on the jeans, in my example. So that person on goods belonging to another registered person. So the supplier of jeans, that person is the person who has the goods, or the goods or the jeans belongs to this person, this supplier. The point is, the supplier must be registered. It is necessary to see that the supplier must be registered person. That's it. So this is job work. When someone undertakes to perform work on those goods which are supplied by another person, it is known as job work. Now let me start with you section 143 simplified version. Now this is that screen simplified. So let me show you the concept of section 143. Now in my example of jeans, what I was telling, that supplier has to send what? Goods. It is possible that supplier also sends what? Buttons. And so many times it is possible that the job worker is very poor person. So job worker may not be having even the machines which are required to perform the job work. In my example of stitching the buttons on jeans, machines may not be required, but there may be so many works where some small machinery is also required. So when that machinery is not available with the job worker, who will send this machine? The same supplier who is supplying the original goods. The supplier is supplying original goods on which job work is required to be done. Along with the goods, supplier may be supplying inputs or even machineries, which we call in GST as capital goods. So this is the first case, that sending of inputs or capital goods. Capital goods is which good? Machinery which is necessary to be supplied so that job work can be done. By whom? By the principal. Sorry, don't confuse this principal with the principal and agent. We have already discussed the concept of principal and agent in the chapter supply, taxable event supply, in the initial chapter. That supply by principal to the agent or agent to the principal, etc. This principle is not that principle. This principle is only for the purpose of job work. So whenever you get the word principal, don't treat that principal always as that person who is related to the agent. In this case, it is the word principal, but it has no relationship with the agent. You cannot say that the job worker is the agent of this supplier. We are only using the word principal. We simply wanted to give a name to one person who is supplying the goods to the job worker, and we have given that name as the principal. But don't confuse this principal with the principal who is having some relationship with the job worker and the relationship is of the agent. It is not the case. This principle is only for the purpose of section 143 job work. That's it. So technically this principle is whom? Supplier of jeans in my example. Now sending of inputs or capital goods by the principal to the job worker, and what is necessary to know, without payment of tax. It is allowed. Otherwise normally it is not allowed. Whenever any supply happens, supplier has to pay the tax. But in this exceptional case, it is possible that when the supplier is supplying jeans to the job worker to stitch buttons, jeans can be supplied without paying tax. This is first new thing. Otherwise, in every supplies, even if you supply to the agent, even if you supply to your own showroom, you have to pay tax. But in job work, government gives the freedom that supplier of goods can supply the goods to the job worker, and that supply can happen without payment of tax. First thing. So this is what you need to know. Now in this video lecture, so many students were having some confusion that they don't have the books. So I have shared with them or with everyone the material of Chartered Accountants of India, final material, CA final material. Even then there was some problem in that material that these were very lengthy, but it is not the case. I gave them instructions, separate files, the topics which cannot be covered from that material. But if still there is any issue, now in all the video lectures, you have these materials and you are supposed to, you can do only these materials. You can pause the video anytime and you'll be having the entire screen with you. So you can prepare your own notes, and these video lectures are acting as your books also. So this is first point, that supplier, that means principal can send the inputs as well as capital goods to the job worker without payment of tax. First point. Now this is the procedure how that item, input or machines can be sent. It is not relevant for your level, so there is no need to do it. So I'm not discussing it. Second thing, as a principal, I have sent the inputs, that means buttons in my example, as well as machinery, but not permanently. I only sent it so that the moment the buttons are stitched, I need to ask back or I need to receive back my unused buttons which I have sent, as well as my machinery. So this is second procedure, bringing back the sent inputs or capital goods by the principal without payment of tax. Now these inputs and machineries are with the job worker. Now after the work is over, job worker will send this back to the principal, and job worker is also not required to pay any tax on this supply, which will happen from job worker to the principal back. So this is also without payment of tax. That supplier has to bring back inputs as well as capital goods without payment of tax. And what is the time limit of bringing back those goods? In case of inputs, the time limit is 1 year of their being sent out. So the day on which as a principal I sent my inputs, buttons in my example, within 1 year I need to get back my buttons. Similarly, the day on which I sent the capital goods, it is, in this case the time limit is 3 years, that within 3 years I have to get back that capital good. In case of capital goods, the time limit is 3 years. Why? Because maybe I need to send the jeans so many times. At first time I have sent 1000 jeans of stock. Maybe after 2 months I will send another 500. So why to move the capital goods with every supply? That is why government says that for 3 years you can supply the capital goods without payment of tax. But after 3 years, within 3 years, you have to get back your capital goods. Second point. Now what I can also do? For the timing, I am saying that supplier, that means the principal is supplying jeans along with the inputs, buttons, and also capital goods. In the second point, I have said that supplier has to get back not only the jeans, of course jeans will be received back, but also inputs as well as capital. But third is the new situation where what can happen? Rather than bringing back my jeans, because I will bring back my jeans to further sell, what can I also do? I can directly supply the jeans from the place of the job worker to any third party. The moment the buttons are stitched, jeans are ready and these can be supplied. So why will I unnecessarily increase my cost in bringing back the jeans from the place of job worker to my place? It is also possible that I can directly sell those jeans from the place of the job worker. It is also allowed. So what the third point is? Supplying the sent inputs or capital goods by the principal from the place of business of job worker on payment of tax within India. So not only jeans, I can sell those buttons also separately if I want. I can sell that machinery also to any third party. So I can sell it. But now I need to pay the tax because that is not now job work. My job work was to stitch the buttons, to get the buttons stitched on the jeans and get back the jeans. But those unused buttons, rather than bringing back, I can supply those unused buttons to another person from the place of business of the job worker. I can sell that machinery also from the place of business of the job worker. Now there are some doubts. I will take these doubts later on. Let me complete this concept. So it is allowed. What is allowed? Supplying or selling the unused buttons from the place of business of the job worker, or selling the capital goods from the place of business of the job worker to any third party. But now that sale is a fresh sale and I can sell it. I means whom? Principal can sell it. Job worker has no right to sell it. Job worker was simply only for the purpose of doing some job work. The machine as well as buttons, though these are at the place of business of the job worker, but that belongs to me, principal. So I can sell those buttons, inputs as well as machinery with payment of tax. Whatever is the GST rate, I have to collect it and the sale is allowed. I can also export those inputs, that buttons as well as machinery. Now, if you remember export, it was zero rated supply under section 16 of the IGST Act. And in zero rated supply, I can do export with payment of tax as well as without payment of tax. So I'm not discussing that section right now. But in this case, what is necessary to know is that it is also possible that you can supply those buttons as well as machine for export with or without payment of tax. That's it. The time limit is also what? Within 1 year. That if I want to supply those jeans and machines also, then also the time limit is what? In case of inputs, within 1 year I can do the supply. And in case of capital goods, I can do the supply within 3 years. Fourth point. Whose responsibility is this to keep the books of account? Normally, it is assumed that the job worker is an illiterate or poor person. So we can't expect the job worker to maintain the records. So all the responsibility to maintain proper recording for inputs and capital goods, it lies with the supplier of jeans. Jeans only in my example, principal. Next point, fifth point. Now there is a consequence. What is that consequence? If you remember second point, the rule says that you have to bring back, as a principal, you have to bring back your inputs within 1 year and capital goods within 3 years. Suppose you fail to bring back these inputs within 1 year or capital goods within 3 years, then what will happen? Then government says that we will assume that you have supplied these to the job worker and pay the GST. So this is the consequence. Deemed supply. In case the inputs are not received back within 1 year or not supplied to any third party within 1 year. So if as a principal you fail to bring back your buttons inputs within 1 year, or you fail to supply these buttons to the third party within 1 year, then government says we will assume that you as a principal have supplied or sold these buttons to the job worker, and on this supply you need to pay the tax. Sorry. Next point, same is the case in capital goods. If you fail as a principal to bring back your capital goods within 3 years, or you fail to supply this capital good within 3 years, then government will assume that you yourself have supplied the machine to the job worker, and on this supply you as a principal will be liable to pay the GST. And what is relevant point is that in both the cases, when you fail to bring back or supply the inputs within 1 year, or you fail to bring back the capital goods or supply the capital goods within 3 years, do you know the problem is what? When the 1 year limit expires or 3 years limit expires, at that time it will not be treated as sale. Sale, the time of supply or the date on which government will assume that you have already sold it, that the original date on which you have supplied those buttons and capital goods to the job worker. See this point. Now you assume a date. On 7th November 2019, suppose you supplied buttons. On 7th November 2019, you supplied buttons. Within 1 year, you were supposed to bring back those buttons. Suppose you fail to bring back those buttons within 1 year. For example, till 6th November 2020, you failed to bring back those unused buttons. On 7th November 19, you supplied the buttons. In case of jeans example, till 6th November 20, you haven't brought those buttons back. So government says we will assume that those unused buttons have been sold by you to the job worker and you pay the GST then. But the date will not be the date of 1 year limit expiry. Government says on the date when you originally sent the buttons, that date will be assumed to be the date when you supplied the buttons. So the date on which it is treated as that the supply of buttons has taken place is not 7th November 2020, which is after 1 year. That will be original. That means 7th November 2019. Same is the case with capital goods. The day when you sent that machine, that day will be treated as the day when you supplied that machine. If you fail to bring back your machine within 1 year, or you fail to supply that machine to any third party with, sorry, not 1 year, 3 years. That's it. Next point. This provision of doing following job work is not compulsory on this supplier. Supplier can supply the inputs as well as machinery to the job worker without payment of tax. It is not optional. Sorry, it is not compulsory. It is optional. If job worker and principal, if principal says that when I will supply the buttons as well as machinery to the job worker, I am willing to pay the tax. Government says no issue. Then you can follow the normal provision. So the provisions of job work are optional. If the supplier is not willing to bring back the machine within 3 years, if the supplier thinks that inputs cannot be brought back within 1 year, then supplier should not go for this provision. This provision is optional on this supplier. It is not compulsory. Now there are some doubts, and let me unmute those students who have asked the doubts, so that if you have any problem, you can ask. Avni, you can ask your doubt. I have unmuted you.
Day when I had
Avni, you can ask your doubt. It is. I can listen now. Your voice.
okay, sir. So I just wanted to know, in case I really like the work of the job worker, and I want to maintain a long relation with that person. So is it really necessary for me to bring my capital good back from that worker after 3 years? Because right now you said like it will be treated as supply if it is for more than 3 years. So can I still keep it with the job worker? Is there any other provision for that?
In case the supplier is interested in following the provisions of job work, then it is necessary to bring back the machine within 3 years. In case you don't want to bring back the machine within 3 years, then you should not follow these special provisions given under section 143. Then you should follow the normal provisions.
Okay, sir.
In
Thank you.
case of job work, it is necessary you have to bring back. But of course, in special cases, commissioner can extend the limit. If you can see this, commissioner can extend this limit. The period of 1 year and 3 years on sufficient cause being shown be extended by the commissioner for a further period not exceeding 1 year and 3 years respectively. In case of machinery, additional 2 years can be given, but then the supplier has to make a representation to the commissioner, and it is for the commissioner to decide whether it is genuine or not.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Now, Shivam, I will unmute you. If you have any doubt, now you can ask. Shivam, you can ask your doubt.
Yeah. So my only doubt was that if the original goods that are to be supplied, like the jeans in this case, are they also supposed to be brought back within the period of 1 year? Say the consignment was sent and the work is not completed yet. So can the period be extended?
Extensions, of course, I have just discussed that then the supplier has to make a representation to the commissioner, and if commissioner
Okay.
thinks that the reasons are
Yeah.
genuine, it can be extended. Otherwise, you have to bring back your inputs within 1 year.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Now, this is my section 143. Now, the question arises for input tax credits, ITC. We have covered the topic ITC, section 19, but let me again revise this section 19 because it is not lengthy. Taking ITC in case of inputs and capital goods sent for job work. So as a principle, whatever buttons I have sent to the job worker, the machinery which I have sent to the job worker, as a principle I have sent, but I have purchased these from someone also. When I purchased these buttons, when I purchased this machinery, I must have paid some tax to that person. So when I am selling or not selling, when I am supplying it to my job worker for the work, can I claim ITC? Answer is yes. As a principle, job worker is not entitled to claim any ITC. As a principle, I have right to avail ITC on inputs as well as capital goods sent to the job worker. Because ultimately, when I will sell the jeans, in the jeans, what I will include? Jeans cost plus button cost plus that machinery cost also subject to the provisions that how machinery ITC can be availed as per Rule 43. We have discussed this in detail. But principal has a right to claim ITC on inputs as well as capital goods sent for the job work. Now, so many times what happens? As a principal, I now from someone I have purchased the jeans or machine. So many times I can directly ask my person from whom I have purchased those buttons that don't deliver those buttons at my shop. I can ask my supplier from whom I have purchased the buttons that deliver these buttons directly at the place of job worker. Now government says in this case also, though as a principal you Now I think I'm audible. There was some break in this connection. Now I was discussing this example ITC. So many times principal, when purchase these buttons from his supplier, will ask the supplier directly to deliver the buttons at the job worker's place, just to minimize my transportation cost. And if you remember ITC section 16, there was a condition that if you do not receive the goods, you cannot claim ITC. Now in this example, as a principal, I have not received the buttons. I have asked my supplier to directly deliver the buttons at the place of business of the job worker. So in this case, government says ITC will still be allowed. It does not matter whether you have received the goods or not, because on your directions only the goods are delivered at the place of business of the job worker. That's it. The topic job work is over. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. And if not, then being Sunday today, I think this lecture is only sufficient. I also need to watch a good movie. Okay, so tomorrow we will start a new topic, refund. Very soon I will upload this lecture also. So these lectures are acting as your books also, because everything you can see on your screen. That's all for today.